They removed Black CEO Big Shaq to make room for a white client. 5 minutes later, the bank lost $50 million. No warning, no second chance. What they mistook for a man in a hoodie was actually the backbone of their future. This wasn't a walkout, it was a financial reckoning. When Big Shaq moves his money, the system doesn't just notice, it breaks. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The glass doors of the downtown Citadel Bank slid open with a muted whisper as Shaquille O'Neal ducked beneath the top frame and stepped inside. At 7'1", he didn't enter buildings. He shifted their gravity, dressed in a charcoal hoodie and tailored joggers, sneakers so clean they practically reflected the marble floor beneath. He moved with a kind of amused grace. No entourage, no flash, just Shaq, hands in his pockets, nodding to the rhythm of the old-school R&B track playing faintly from the overhead speakers. "Morning, boss," called the security guard by the entrance, grinning wide. Shaq grinned back, bumping fists. "You still dodging those lunchtime laps? Or are you just wearing the badge for cardio?" The guard laughed. "Man, don't start. You already know I'm allergic to sweat." Shaq chuckled and kept walking, catching sight of a kid in line holding his mother's hand. The boy stared, eyes wide as a coin. "You Shaq?" the boy asked, pointing. Shaq bent down slowly, bringing himself to the boy's height. "Nah, man," he said with a wink. "I'm his twin, just slightly less famous." The boy laughed. His mom smiled politely, trying not to linger, but clearly appreciative. Shaq stood back up and gave the boy a gentle high five before turning toward the concierge desk. The branch manager had called 2 days ago to confirm his appointment. A scheduled visit to finalize a $50 million philanthropic investment fund, targeting community education. The plan was clean. Simple. In and out. Dot signatures. Confirm wire authorizations. Then lunch with the nonprofit board across the street. But plans meant very little when assumptions walked faster than facts. A woman in a tailored navy pantsuit stepped out from behind the concierge desk, lips tight, clipboard in hand. She gave Shaq a cursory once-over, eyes lingering on his hoodie like it had personally offended the lobby. "Can I help you?" she asked. Shaq smiled. "Shaquille O'Neal, 10 a.m. with Mr. Lindholm." Her brows pinched. Subtly, she checked her tablet. "Name again?" "Shaq," he said, more softly this time, still smiling. "Or O'Neal, whichever makes the list less confused." She typed something, eyes flicking between him and the screen. "I don't see you listed. Are you sure the meeting's today?" Shaq reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid it across the counter with the email open. Confirmed. Cleared. Timestamp. Her eyes scanned the screen. Then she offered a clipped smile, the kind that covered a misstep with courtesy. "One moment." She stepped aside and whispered into her earpiece. Shaq waited, tapping his fingers lightly on the counter. Across the room, a tall white man in a pressed gray suit walked through the revolving door and was greeted like royalty. A manager, Lindholm himself, rushed out from the back with a ready handshake. "Mr. Pembroke, so glad you could make it." The suited man nodded and moved past Shaq without a glance. The concierge stiffened. She whispered again, more urgently this time. Shaq tilted his head slightly, catching enough to hear fragments. "Unscheduled presence. Hooded male. Says he's Shaquille O'Neal." The phrasing didn't bother him. What did was the way the energy changed around him. As if the room had decided he didn't belong. The warmth that followed Pembroke hadn't followed him. It wasn't just a mistake. It was the speed of the presumption. Lindholm emerged from the back, checking his phone mid-stride. Then looked up. He froze, squinting.
"Mr. O'Neal, apologies, we weren't expecting."
He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Shaq's shoulders didn't rise. His jaw didn't tense. But the silence that followed pressed 1,000 unspoken things into the floor between them. "Let's head to the private lounge," Lindholm said after an awkward beat, motioning left. They didn't get far. Another suited staff member approached, headset in ear, clipboard clutched like a badge of command. "Excuse me, sir," she said to Shaq, cutting between him and Lindholm. "We'll need you to wait in the main lobby. That area's reserved for Tier 1 clients." Lindholm opened his mouth, stopped, said nothing. Shaq looked between them. "I am a Tier 1 client." She glanced at his clothes again. "Sir, we understand, but this area is restricted, unless you're an approved executive tier investor." Compliance standards. Are you telling me, Shaq asked, calmly, that you're going to remove me from my own meeting space because of what I'm wearing? It's not personal, she said, smiling in a way that suggested it very much was. A security guard, not the one from the door, appeared a few feet away, arms folded, watching. Sir, we'd just like to avoid confusion, she added. If you'd wait by the teller line, someone will assist shortly. Shaq didn't argue. He didn't ask again. He simply turned, walked across the lobby, sat in one of the low vinyl chairs near the customer queue. A teenage girl nearby angled her phone subtly and snapped a picture. Somewhere in the back, Lindholm's voice tried to sound apologetic as he spoke into a phone. The moment had passed. The cost hadn't. Shaq pulled out his phone again and tapped a name. Jamal, he said, when his CFO picked up. Pull the deal. Wait, what? Pull it. All of it. I'll explain later. From across the lobby, the woman with the clipboard paused, sensing movement. Also, Shaq said quietly into the phone, transfer everything out of Citadel by noon. All 50. You sure? Dead sure. He hung up. 5 minutes passed. Then the bank's internal system pinged. Then again, a red alert flag on a Tier 1 investor account. Withdrawals initiated. Entire portfolios vacating line by line. Managers sprinted to the back office. Emails stacked. Panic unpacked itself like luggage dropped too fast. A young teller noticed first and looked up, confused. Lindholm's voice rose in the back room. Someone else swore, loud enough to draw stares. Shaq didn't move. When a junior assistant finally rushed over to him, flustered and pale, tablet in hand, she didn't know what to say. Mr. O'Neill. Sir, we apologize for the confusion. The lounge is ready. He stood, towering gently. You sure? She nodded quickly, words catching in her throat. He walked with her, the crowd parting around him now, not from familiarity, but from sudden recognition, not of fame, but of leverage, of error. Inside the now cleared lounge, he sat calm, composed. I came here, he said slowly, to give, not to prove. The assistant said nothing. I've spent a lifetime smiling through doors that didn't expect me. I don't need another apology. I need accountability. She swallowed hard, unsure what to do with her hands. Tell your compliance lead, Shaq added, that I don't wear my value on my collar. I wear it in the communities I serve, and I know exactly who gets uncomfortable with that. Outside the glass, Lindholm stood frozen, watching the man he'd failed to defend now sitting in the lounge he'd been denied. But Shaq wasn't looking at him. He was looking out the window, across the skyline, at the city he still planned to uplift. Just not with this institution. Because what they didn't know wasn't just who he was. It was what he stood for. And what he would never stand for again. Setup. Shaq in the world. The lounge they finally escorted him to was sleek, understated, mid-century leather seating, coffee bar in the corner, gold-accented wall trim that tried too hard not to be noticed. It was the kind of room meant to feel important without ever making someone like Shaq feel comfortable in it. But he'd been in enough rooms like this to know their real design wasn't architectural. It was psychological. And the message had already been delivered the moment he was redirected away from it. He eased his frame into one of the corner chairs with slow precision, trying not to overtake the space the way his height always threatened to. He wasn't there to dominate. He was there to discuss futures, ones that belonged to kids who'd never walk into a bank like this, much less get to build with it. His foundation, Shaq built, had been working on a regional push to restore education infrastructure across low-income neighborhoods, starting with school meal programs, STEM labs, and after-school mentorship hubs. $50 million, all backed by corporate partners and a matching commitment from state funding, had to be channeled through a safe, reputable banking institution. His team had landed on Citadel after months of vetting. The irony wasn't lost on him now. He scrolled through his phone, reviewing the trust transfer outline he'd prepared for Mr. Lindholm. The same man currently whispering behind a frosted glass panel, with 2 compliance officers. Shaq caught their glances, brief, flicking over the glass like headlights in fog. He pretended not to notice. His phone buzzed, a message from one of the nonprofit directors waiting for him across the street. Everything okay? Board seated. We'll hold till you arrive. He typed back, running late. Sit tight. Worth it. A moment later, the door opened. A different man stepped in this time, mid-40s, trim, navy pinstripe, eyes that had memorized spreadsheets but not people. "Mr. O'Neill," he said, trying for sincerity, "I'm Colin from Compliance Risk Management. Just wanted to formally apologize for the earlier redirection." A system flag went off, apparently from an old institutional risk profile. "We've since cleared it." Shaq looked at him, calm as ever. "System flag? Based on what?" Colin blinked. "Just an outdated legacy algorithm. We believe it had to do with incomplete financial classification tags. It's rare. You see certain profiles, accounts that aren't traditionally verified through white glove channels, they tend to get flagged." "White glove meaning what?" Shaq's voice didn't rise, but it slowed, the way a storm does when it's choosing its target. Colin tried to recalibrate. "Just traditional high net worth verification systems, sir. Typically tied to trust advisors, long-term portfolio lineage, that sort of thing. When names pop up without that historical metadata, especially in non-traditional attire, not to say yours." "You're saying I don't match your expected pattern?" No. I mean, not anymore. The system's been adjusted, your identity's been confirmed, and again, apologies for the delay." Shaq exhaled, long and slow. "I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for signatures. So let's get that paperwork in front of me." Colin nodded quickly and retreated. A few moments later, Lindholm entered again, this time with less confidence and more visible sweat. He set down a folder, opened it, and slid 2 documents across the table: transfer agreements and fiduciary trust routing authorization. Shaq scanned the first page, then stopped. "You forgot the clause," he said. "Clause?" "The community reinvestment trigger. Page 5, subsection 3. The one that commits you to deploying a percentage of our holdings in social development portfolios. We discussed it last month. Your team agreed." Lindholm flushed. That clause was removed in the final version. Legal felt it was too aggressive, market-wise. Shaq leaned back, jaw tight. "Let me ask you something. If a hedge fund exec walked in here, said he wanted a 10-year tax-shielded reinvestment route, you'd say yes?" "Well, you wouldn't blink," Shaq continued. "But I walk in saying I want a portion of my own money to be directed toward helping black and brown schools in underfunded districts, and that's too aggressive." "It's not about that." "No," Shaq said, voice razor flat. "It's always not about that." Lindholm looked down. "We can adjust the language. It's negotiable." Shaq tapped his finger on the folder. "It was never negotiable. It's part of the deal. No clause, no contract. I'll call legal." "You'll do more than that," Shaq said. "You'll draft an addendum right here, right now, because this bank isn't just holding my money, it's being invited into a partnership with impact. And if you can't recognize the difference, then maybe I picked the wrong partner." Lindholm nodded quickly, scribbled on his notepad, then stepped out. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence again. Shaq stood slowly, walked to the window. The city sprawled below. Glass towers, asphalt scars, bridges that led nowhere for people who didn't have the right address. He thought about the schools in East Oakland, where he'd played pickup with kids last month. No air conditioning, rusted hoops, bathrooms that hadn't been updated since the 80s. This money wasn't for ego. It was for insulation, for heat, for dreams that didn't have to be deferred. Behind him, the door opened again. Lindholm returned with a tablet. "Addendum ready. If you'll approve, we'll co-sign and route it to fiduciary processing." Shaq turned, read the screen. It was clean, respectful, binding. He nodded. "Signed. You'll still be attending the press event?" Lindholm asked. Shaq looked at him. "I'll attend, but I'll be choosing where the cameras go." The man blinked, unsure what that meant. "You're not the story," Shaq clarified. "The kids are." Before Lindholm could respond, a low murmur filtered through the hall. A voice, then 2, then hushed panic. "Sir," a different assistant said, stepping in hurriedly. "We've got a situation." Lindholm paled. "We've been notified that Mr. O'Neill's fund just initiated full withdrawal protocols for all secondary Citadel accounts across 5 states. Partner firms are backing out. Corporate alliances too." Lindholm's eyes widened.
What?
"I don't know, it seemed simultaneous, like someone flipped a switch." Shaq didn't say anything. Lindholm turned to him. "Mr. O'Neill, we just finalized. You finalized this office's part, but not the rest."
I don't understand.
Shaq finally looked him in the eye. "This morning, someone whispered, I looked like I was casing your bank. Lindholm froze. I've walked through cities at midnight safer than how that moment felt. You don't get to walk that back with a pen. You do it with policy, with posture, with people who don't flinch when someone walks in, wearing a hoodie instead of a Rolex. Another ping. A third assistant entered. Sir, Forbes just posted it. The divestment. Social media's running with it. It's everywhere. Lindholm sagged into the chair. Shaq grabbed the folder, slid it under his arm. Let me make this easy, he said. You're not being punished. You're being reminded that influence isn't always about volume. Sometimes it just walks in quietly and waits to be seen. He headed toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Lindholm looked up, eyes desperate for some salvageable line. That same kid I high-fived in your lobby? You'll see him again. Probably in 20 years, when he owns twice what I do. I just hope you treat him better than you treated me. He left. As he walked down the hallway, staff parted. Phones buzzed in every pocket. A wave was forming, and no one knew yet if it would crash or carry them. Shaq reached the exit. Outside, the nonprofit director waited, clipboard in hand, brows raised. Everything smooth. Shaq smiled. It's about to be. They crossed the street together, and behind them, the tower of glass began to sweat. Shaq had just placed his signed paperwork back in the folder when the click of high-end shoes on marble echoed from behind the glass doors. The sound was sharp, deliberate, confident, not the kind that asked permission, the kind that announced arrival. A man in his mid-50s, rail-thin, dressed in an ash-gray custom Brian suit, entered the branch with the quiet arrogance of someone who'd never been asked for ID in his life. His hair was white, neatly parted, and his leather briefcase looked like it hadn't aged a day in a decade. The kind of client the institution polished its tiles for. He didn't wait at the front desk. He didn't even glance toward the reception. Instead, he made a beeline straight toward the executive wing where Shaq was seated, nodding faintly at a junior manager who sprinted to meet him halfway. Mr. Layton, the young man said, breathlessly, welcome back. The man didn't respond with words. Just a small wave of his hand as he continued walking, as if to say, of course. Why wouldn't I be here? Behind the glass partition, Colin from compliance poked his head back into the lounge, eyes darting. He looked directly at Shaq, then at Layton, approaching, then back at Shaq again, like a waiter realizing two guests had been seated at the same table. Excuse me, Mr. O'Neill, Colin said quickly, stepping into the room. I just need a moment of your time. Shaq stood slowly, unsure if this was follow-up or more delay. There seems to have been an unexpected scheduling overlap, Colin continued. The private suite has been pre-assigned for a Tier 1 client with legacy status. If you wouldn't mind relocating to the adjacent waiting area, we'll accommodate you there while we finalize the back-end paperwork. Shaq looked at him without blinking. Relocate? You mean leave? Colin smiled nervously. Just temporarily. It's standard practice when overlapping reservations occur. Nothing personal, I assure you. Before Shaq could respond, Lindholm reappeared. This time, he didn't enter. He stood just outside the lounge, shoulders stiff, eyes doing that flickering thing again, scanning for a solution that wouldn't cost him his balance sheet. Shaquille, he said too casually. I'll personally walk you to our alternative suite. Same amenities, of course. It's just, Mr. Layton prefers this room, and he's well been with Citadel since our founding days. And I've been with your future, Shaq replied. Voice even. Or does that hold less value than the past? Lindholm hesitated. We just want to avoid conflict. Optics, you know. It's a fluid morning. Shaq stepped forward, folder still in hand, expression unreadable. Let me get this straight. After all the back and forth, the red flags, the lounge debacle, and a delay in processing that almost blew a state-level partnership, you're asking me to step out of this room because another man walked in wearing a tailored suit. Colin spoke again, carefully. Sir, it's not about who he is, it's about protocol. Long-term clients like Mr. Layton have priority seating based on tenure and contribution volume. Shaq raised one brow. You do know I just committed $50 million, right? Lindholm raised his hands in placation. It's a mistake, Shaquille. We'll fix it. But please. Just then, a third figure appeared behind Lindholm. Layton himself. He stopped a few steps from the doorway, peering inside with a curious smile, as if confused about why anyone else was already using what he considered his room. Colin, Layton said. Something wrong with my usual? Just a minor overlap, Colin replied with a tight-lipped smile. We're resolving it now. Shaq locked eyes with the man. Leighton returned the look with a polite nod, no hint of recognition on his face. Not recognition of Shaq's name, or presence, or worth. Just that clean, dismissive smile that said, "This isn't your room, and we both know it." "I see," Leighton said. "Well, I've got a 9-figure trade to finalize in 20 minutes. Let me know when it's ready." He turned and walked back toward the hallway, unhurried, unbothered. Colin stepped in again. "Mr. O'Neill, if I may, this will just be temporary. We appreciate your flexibility." Shaq stared at them both. Then, slowly, he placed the folder back on the table. His hands didn't shake, his face didn't harden, but his energy shifted. It didn't rise like rage. It descended, like pressure, like something heavy settling into its rightful weight. "I'm not flexible," he said quietly. "I'm focused." "Sir, you're asking me to move," he continued. "So a man who never had to wait a day in his life can feel like nothing's changed. So he can pretend this room still belongs only to him, and people like me still wait for access." "No one said that," Colin insisted. "You didn't have to." The room felt colder now. Lindholm looked down. Colin tried to hold eye contact, but faltered. The assistant outside fidgeted, clearly regretting being present. "Security?" someone whispered, quiet but audible. Shaq heard it. He turned his head, slowly, and looked toward the corridor. A uniformed guard had appeared just outside the executive wing, hands clasped, face neutral. They hadn't been called. Not officially, not yet, but they were always nearby, just in case. Shaq's voice dropped to a whisper. "Did you just call security?" "No," Colin lied. "You didn't need to," Shaq replied. "They've been watching since I walked in." There was silence. Then Lindholm stepped forward with manufactured regret. "Mr. O'Neill, this isn't meant to escalate, but we do have to maintain order in shared spaces. Please understand, this is not personal." Shaq gave him a look that could have split granite. Then, without a word, he picked up the folder, walked to the door, and stepped out. The hallway went still. The security guard took a half-step back, unsure whether to intercept or retreat. Shaq kept walking, past Colin, past Lindholm, past the receptionist who now avoided his eyes. Every eye, in the executive wing, followed him. Some curious, some guilty, some indifferent, all silent. He passed Leighton in the adjacent corridor. The man smiled faintly again, as though confirming that order had been restored. Shaq didn't return the smile. Outside, the main lobby hummed with the usual rhythm of morning finance. Keyboards clacking, printers running, pens signing lines they didn't read. But the moment he stepped into the open space, something shifted. A woman near the loan desk looked up and recognized him. Her eyes widened. A man on a nearby couch glanced from his phone to Shaq, confused. A whisper followed, then another. He paused by the receptionist's desk. The same woman who hadn't believed he had an appointment now stood stiffly, unsure what to say. He didn't give her the chance. "Protocol," he said simply, "isn't an apology. It's a disguise." Then he turned toward the exit, folder still under his arm. As the glass doors opened, the branch manager's voice crackled faintly behind him. Rushed, anxious, trying to grab control that had already left the room. "Mr. O'Neill, please, we'll fix it." "This isn't how it's supposed to happen." Shaq kept walking. Outside, the street was alive. Buses coughing diesel, crosswalks flashing orange, lives in motion. He didn't rush to the curb. He didn't check his phone. He just stood for a moment, breathing in the real air. Not the filtered kind that buzzed through executive suites, the kind that belongs to everyone. His phone finally buzzed. A message from his CFO, Jamal. "You want me to pull the rest now?" Shaq replied with one word. "Yep." Another message followed seconds later. "That's gonna hit hard." "You sure?" Shaq didn't respond. He didn't need to. Behind him, inside the bank, Colin's tablet began to flash. Multiple accounts, funds liquidating, wires rerouting. Every ping a reminder. Shaq hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't flipped a desk. He hadn't demanded an audience. He had simply walked out and taken $50 million with him. No headlines, no press release, just a lesson, delivered quietly, exactly the way they'd tried to erase him. Shaq didn't storm off. That wasn't his way. He stepped out into the sunlight, calm as morning, folder still tucked under one arm, and walked the short distance to the black Escalade idling by the curb. His driver, a A quiet, attentive man, named Marcus, nodded without question, opened the door, and waited. Not the next meeting yet, Shaq said, pausing. Where to then, sir? Take me to the Midtown branch, he replied. Citadel. Secondary headquarters. Marcus hesitated only a second, then nodded. On it. As the SUV pulled away, Shaq sat back, phone in hand, already reviewing documentation. There were no rants, no voice messages to lawyers or agents. Just quiet scanning, numbers, names, ledgers. Control didn't need to shout. It just needed clarity. And right now, he wanted to see exactly what they saw when his name hit their system. 32 minutes later, the Escalade pulled up to the Midtown branch. This one was newer, more modern, glass walls curved like a sculpture. Minimalism designed to suggest openness. Shaq stepped out calm and collected, and walked through the revolving door with a presence that turned heads instantly. Inside, the air felt cooler. Not from the AC, but from something else. Uncertainty. The kind that whispers between staffers before anyone speaks aloud. A clerk at the main desk stiffened the moment he saw Shaq enter. He tapped something under the desk, likely alerting a manager, not because Shaq looked dangerous, but because the system told him to be cautious. The receptionist greeted him with forced warmth. Good afternoon. How can we assist you today? Shaq smiled politely. I'm here regarding a flagged transfer. 50 million. From my foundation. I'd like to speak with someone in compliance. The woman's eyes flicked to her monitor, and she typed with controlled urgency. One moment, Mr. O'Neill. She didn't ask him to spell it. Didn't ask for ID. His presence had already done enough to confirm identity and unsettle assumptions. Within 2 minutes, a compliance officer arrived. Short, lean, early 40s, wireframe glasses perched too low on his nose. He introduced himself as Gerald Dunn. Mr. O'Neill, I understand there's been an issue with a flagged transaction, Gerald said, motioning toward a side hallway. We can discuss the details in our review suite. If you'll follow me. Shaq nodded and followed him down the corridor. The suite was glass-walled, but private, functional, no windows, just a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a mounted screen, pulsing with Citadel's marbled logo. Once seated, Gerald opened a laptop and began pulling up files. He cleared his throat, carefully avoiding eye contact. So, the flagged transaction. It appears your wire initiated from a trust associated with your nonprofit. That part's clean. But our internal system flagged the secondary routing paths. We use an algorithm that's designed to detect high-volume risk behavior. When certain patterns hit, especially ones that fall outside traditional executive banking structures, we get a... Shaq tilted his head. What kind of patterns? Gerald adjusted his glasses. Let's say certain payment behaviors associated with newer nonprofits or high-speed fund consolidations. Multiple holdings, dynamic transfer environments. It can resemble laundering structures, particularly when there's limited verification from intermediary accounts. So, let me get this straight, Shaq said slowly. I move money through multiple accounts for transparency. I provide advance notification. You get exact authorization from my team. But because it doesn't follow the blueprint of a 70-year-old hedge fund, it gets flagged. We're not accusing anyone of wrongdoing, Gerald said quickly. It's just precautionary. We protect both the institution and our clients from possible misuse, even when the client is the one doing the giving. Gerald paused. It's not personal. Shaq offered a patient smile. It never is, right? Gerald leaned forward slightly. If you wouldn't mind providing independent verification, just to get this cleared quickly. Shaq reached into his briefcase, pulled out a leather portfolio, and opened it without flair. Inside was a stack of clean documentation, transaction history, IRS tax filings, verified fund ownership, letterhead from the foundation, routing confirmations, 5 pages deep, each item stamped, signed, watermarked. He slid it across the table. Gerald took the folder and skimmed the first 2 pages. His face tightened, slightly, but not with embarrassment, more like reluctance. The kind that comes from realizing you're about to be proven wrong, but still searching for a way to save face. This is very thorough, Gerald admitted. But I'll still need to forward this to Tier 2 risk. They'll determine if the hold can be removed before full clearance. Shaq raised a brow. And that takes how long? Gerald didn't answer right away. Depends. Could be a few hours. Maybe a day or 2. Shaq leaned back in his chair. Let me guess. If my name were on your internal legacy list, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's not how our system works. No? Shaq asked. Then why'd your Manhattan branch remove me from a room I was assigned, after I had already signed paperwork and committed to funding 5 public school districts? Gerald blinked, confused. I wasn't aware of that. You don't need to be aware, Shaq replied. The system was. Gerald tried to shift the tone. I'm sure it was just an oversight. An oversight that included a compliance warning, a room reassignment, a security presence, and now a verification interrogation. Shaq shook his head. You're not protecting money, you're protecting a mold. And when someone doesn't fit, you flag them. I think you're reading too much into this. No, Shaq said, voice even. I'm reading exactly what's there. He stood, picked up the folder again and paused at the edge of the desk. His frame filled the doorway, casting a long shadow across the desk and Gerald's nervous hands. I've never asked for special treatment. I've never expected doors to open just because I'm recognized. But I do expect the same rules you give to those who don't need to explain themselves. Gerald looked away, pressing a key to mute the screen. Shaq gave him one last look. You want to know what gets flagged in my system? Institutions that assume legitimacy, only wears one skin, speaks one tone, and moves one way. That's not protocol. That's prejudice dressed in software. Without waiting for a response, he left the room. As he stepped back into the main corridor, he saw a junior banker hurrying past, holding a printed copy of his own photo. A memo was stapled to it. His name, the flag notice, the words Special Oversight Review in all caps. It wasn't even discreet. It was bureaucracy on autopilot, and the machine had a face now. He walked past the front desk, where a new clerk had taken over. She glanced up from her monitor and did a double take. Her hand hovered over the mouse, then froze, unsure if she should offer help or pretend not to see him. Tell Tier 2 this, he said aloud, not stopping. They've got until sunset to clear the funds, or the next review won't be about compliance. It'll be about credibility. He stepped outside, back into the city's pulse. The sun was higher now, shadows sharper. A call buzzed through his phone. Jamal again. Status? Shaq asked. They're stalling, Jamal replied. Same excuse. System flag. I've already queued the backup channel. Want me to execute? Shaq thought for a second, then answered. Yeah. Run the alternative protocol. But don't close the Citadel accounts. Let them watch. You got it. Anything else? Yeah, Shaq said. Book me on the 3 p.m. radio segment. And see if that non-profit podcast we talked to last year has an opening this week. Jamal hesitated. You going public? Shaq smiled faintly. Not for drama, for detail. People think power only lives in outrage. But sometimes it lives in the facts no one else wants to say out loud. He hung up. Across the street, a group of students exited a charter school building. Laughing, backpacks swinging, sneakers tapping against concrete. One of them looked up and recognized him. Pointing, smiling. Shaq waited. They didn't know about flagged accounts or compliance rooms. But they would one day, and by then they'd know who fought back with receipts instead of revenge. Shaq stood in the middle of Citadel Bank's Midtown lobby, folder in hand, gaze locked, somewhere between the concierge desk and the sea of occupied teller windows. For a man who'd owned NBA courts and network stages, this moment felt smaller than it should have, but heavier than most people would ever know. Sir, if you'd like to wait just over there, a junior staffer said, gesturing toward a low cluster of armchairs near the customer service queue. The space was public, open, nothing close to private, a far cry from the executive lounge where his meeting should have finished. But he nodded without resistance and moved toward the seating area, folding his large frame into a chair clearly not designed for someone of his size or status. Around him the ambient noise of the bank rolled on, light typing, distant printers, quiet phone calls, and the rhythmic hum of the air conditioning. But there was another sound layered just beneath the obvious, a shift in tone that always arrived when someone famous stepped into a space, not expecting fame. 2 teenagers by the deposit station noticed him first. One whispered. The other reached into her bag for a phone. A click, then another. The flash off. Stealthy, but not invisible. A woman in line looked up from her phone and nudged her husband. He turned, glanced, and quickly whispered something she laughed at behind her hand. Shaq exhaled slowly. He wasn't new to being seen, but he knew the difference between being recognized and being watched. This was the latter. A passing clerk in a navy vest paused near the glass divider and muttered something under her breath. Another teller behind her chuckled. Shaq didn't catch the whole sentence, but one phrase stuck, clear enough to sting.
Why is he making a scene?
He didn't flinch, just leaned forward, elbows on knees, folder resting on his lap. He'd played through louder jeers, faced fouls harder than any whispered jab. But here there was no scoreboard, no final buzzer, just the slow crawl of systems pretending neutrality. A customer service rep approached a few minutes later, young, eager, trying to smile her way through awkwardness. She held a cup of coffee in one hand and a small paper napkin in the other. "Mr. O'Neill," she said, voice bright. "We just wanted to offer this while you wait. Apologies for the delay. Our team is doing everything we can to sort out the back-end issue." Shaq took the coffee, nodded once. "Appreciate it." The rep lingered a second longer. "Let us know if there's anything else we can do." "You can start by acknowledging what this is," he said softly. She blinked, thrown off by the directness. "I'm sorry, this isn't about a back-end issue," he said. "This is about the fact that your system saw my name, saw my transfer and flagged it, not because of an error, but because someone decided my profile didn't fit the pattern." Her smile faltered. "I can bring someone from compliance." "You already did," he replied, "and they brought security." The rep swallowed hard, glanced over her shoulder, then excused herself. Shaq sipped the coffee. It was lukewarm. Of course it was. To his left, a banker returned to her workstation. An open desk about 12 feet away, no divider between them. She logged into her terminal, and as her screen loaded, Shaq noticed a yellow sticky note stuck to the top right corner of her monitor. He didn't mean to read it, but the words were printed in thick black Sharpie, unmistakable even from a distance. Shaquille O'Neal. Sensitive watch flag. 3 words underlined in red. No context, no expiration, just a label. And labels, he knew, had a way of sticking long after facts faded. He leaned back in the chair, mind sharpening. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a fluke. It was a narrative preloaded into a machine designed to camouflage its bias beneath technical terms and polite tones. They hadn't just flagged a transaction. They had quietly marked him. He looked around again. The waiting area was busy now. A child cried softly in the distance. A teller called someone's name. Someone nearby whispered, "He's still here?" The energy in the room had turned. He felt it, like heat under glass. No one was throwing him out, but no one was fixing the wrong either. Just apologizing to the air, and hoping it would be enough. A few feet away, a senior manager crossed the lobby, talking to another banker. Shaq caught the last part of the conversation. "I don't know. Maybe he should have sent his assistant. Would have gone smoother." The comment wasn't loud, but it was clear, and unguarded. Shaq stood up, quietly, deliberately. He walked over to the central kiosk, the same one he'd passed on his way in. The clerk there looked up, startled. "I need a printout," Shaq said, calm but pointed. "A printout of my account, transaction notes, last 10 system flags associated with my name, internal review comments. All of it." The clerk hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm authorized." "Then get someone who is." She stepped away, and minutes later, Gerald from compliance returned, this time visibly less confident. "Mr. O'Neill, is there an issue?" "There's been one," Shaq said. "I just want to see how deep it runs." Gerald sighed. "As I mentioned earlier, the system—" Shaq cut him off. "Don't talk about the system like it's separate from you. The system isn't some ghost in the code. It's built by people, run by people, and right now it's acting exactly how people designed it to." "Sir, the flag is procedural." "No," Shaq said, stepping slightly closer, not intimidating, but undeniable. "It's performative. You're not checking for risk, you're checking for conformity. And when someone doesn't match the profile, you call it a threat." Gerald didn't respond. Instead, he handed over a single printed page, not the full record, just a high-level summary. Shaq took it, eyes scanning the text. There it was. Client profile, inconsistent historic metadata, trigger non-standard attire, non-corporate appearance, high-value disbursement, internal note. Client does not match expected executive persona. Proceed with caution. Shaq read the line twice. Executive persona, he repeated aloud. "You mean a suit?" Gerald stammered. "That's just phrasing. Our system evaluates tone, dress, behavioral cues. You evaluate costumes," Shaq said. And when someone like me shows up without one, you assume they're playing dress up. He folded the paper and slid it into his folder with the rest of his documentation. You've done me a favor, Gerald. You've helped me understand this institution better than any pitch deck ever could. Mr. O'Neill, please, this isn't what we want. The press, the visibility. Shaq raised a hand. You think I'm going to the press? Gerald paused. I'm going to the boardroom. Shaq walked away. No raised voice. No confrontation. Just purpose. Outside, the sunlight had shifted. The clouds were thinning. And for the first time all day, Shaq wasn't just responding. He was preparing. The flag wasn't the threat. It was the signal. And now he intended to answer it. Publicly. Thoroughly. And in language every institution understood. Accountability. Shaq had found his corner. Not in any official lounge or VIP suite, but near a frosted glass panel facing the side hallway just off the teller floor. The chair he sat in creaked faintly when he shifted. Not because it was old, but because it wasn't meant for someone like him. Not in size, not in significance. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. And the wait had become its own education. Through the thin walls of the panel, and the poorly concealed voices just beyond it, a pattern had begun to form. Not loud, not hostile, but layered. One conversation bled into another. One assumption shaped the next. He's still here. I don't know. Something about account verification. You'd think someone with that kind of money would have a better team. Then came the sentence that landed soft but stuck hard. Just let the real clients through. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It was said with the smooth quiet of someone who had said it before, or at least believed it long enough for it to come out effortlessly. Shaq didn't know who had said it. He didn't need to. The voice was familiar, the tone unmistakable. Entitlement, wrapped in routine. He leaned back slightly in the chair, one hand resting on the folder in his lap. He didn't look around, didn't search for the source, because he knew already, the voice wasn't just a person. It was the system, speaking in human form. Shaq's phone buzzed once. Jamal had messaged. No update yet from Tier 2. We're prepping Plan B, he replied. Hold it. Let them move first. As he tucked the phone back in his jacket, a young teller stepped out from behind the teller pods. She moved hesitantly, like someone who didn't want to be noticed, but felt compelled to act anyway. She was in her early 20s maybe, dark green blazer, citadel pin, and eyes that held more apology than her badge could carry. She didn't walk all the way over, just paused a few feet away, like the glass of unspoken policies between them was too thick to break. She gave a soft nod. Nothing grand, nothing loud. A silent gesture. Sorry. Shaq met her gaze, then offered a smile. Not wide, not performative, just a quiet curve of gratitude. The kind that says, I see you, even if your institution doesn't. The moment passed. She walked back to her post, back to her screen, back to her own performance of staying neutral. He didn't blame her. Not for the silence, not for the distance. He understood it too well. The burden of being inside a machine that could punish you for pausing. He'd been her once, not in a bank, but in rooms where being black meant always watching your volume, your tone, your proximity to comfort. And now she was navigating that same space, trying to offer dignity with just her eyes. He remembered the first time he was told, early in his career, that being too vocal could cost him sponsors, that being too sharp in interviews would make boardrooms nervous. That smiling wasn't just branding, it was armor. But what happens when even armor gets scanned, like a threat? Across the floor, a senior banker with salt and pepper hair stepped toward a pair of well-dressed clients who had just entered. They carried briefcases, spoke in low, deliberate tones, and moved like men who expected to be ushered forward. The banker smiled, extended his hand and said, just loud enough to carry. Right this way, gentlemen. We'll skip you past the hold-up near Section B. Let's keep real business moving. Shaq didn't react, not visibly, but his mind filed it. Another whisper in the network. One more data point. He tapped open his notes app and began typing. Phrase, let real clients through. Clerk response, none. Body language. Avoidant. Internal language reinforcing tiered validation. He scrolled down to a section titled Unwritten Rules, then added a new bullet. Realness is proximity to their definition, not yours. Behind him, the murmur of footsteps shifted as a group of bank employees exited from a rear elevator. One of them, a young South Asian man in citadel livery, caught sight of Shaq and paused just long enough to check his name badge before whispering something to his colleague. Shaq had spent years reading defenses on a court. This was no different. That glance. It wasn't curiosity. It was caution. Like spotting a fire that hadn't yet sparked but still made you check the exits. He kept writing. He didn't know where all these observations were going yet. But he knew one thing.
They weren't staying in his phone.
A voice crackled through the overhead speaker. Something about a security check and a system refresh. The irony was thick. The system needed a refresh. All right. But not the kind IT could do. Not the kind an overnight patch could fix. Across the lobby, a branch manager exited her glass office. Mid-30s. Corporate perfect. She walked quickly but with purpose. Eyes scanning the room. She stopped short when she spotted him. Their eyes met. She hesitated, then approached. "Mr. O'Neill," she said with a plastic smile. "Sorry for the wait. I've been briefed. It seems there's been some confusion about the nature of your account activity." Shaq raised a brow. "Is that what you're calling it now? Confusion?" She cleared her throat. "Just to clarify, we've elevated your file to our partner relationship division. They're working on a more tailored approach moving forward." "Tailored?" he repeated. "Sounds expensive." "No," she said quickly. "I mean customized. Curated. Based on your unique operational structure." "You mean the structure where I donate more money in a year than most of your Tier 1 clients make?" Her smile thinned. "We're grateful for your philanthropy, Mr. O'Neill. And we're working hard to make this right. But not fast," he replied. Silence stretched between them. She shifted. "Would you like to move to a quieter part of the floor? We can prepare a side office while the final approvals come through." "Why now?" She paused. "Excuse me, you had quieter offices earlier," he said. "You had opportunities to make this clean, private, respectful. But now, after 2 hours of exposure, photos, whispers, a sticky note labeling me as a threat, now you want to show discretion." Her face reddened slightly. "I apologize. You keep saying that word," Shaq cut in. "But apology without reflection is just strategy. What are you actually going to do? Not for me. For the next person who walks in here and doesn't get recognized until you realize what it might cost you." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Shaq stood up. Towered. Still calm. Still centered. "I'm not here for your coffee," he said. "I'm here for consistency. And if you can't offer it, don't offer the cup." He turned, folder still under his arm, and walked toward the exit again. This time, no one stopped him. Not because they understood, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they tried. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the street in long streaks of gold. He took a deep breath. The air tasted better out here. It didn't buzz with caution. It didn't whisper behind glass. His phone buzzed again. "Jamal, 3 regional branches are calling, asking for clarification on your account status." Shaq replied, "Give them clarity. Tell them I'm listening and taking notes." Then he opened his calendar, scrolled to next Thursday, and blocked off the morning. Meeting advisory roundtable, new banking platform viability. Because if the system keeps whispering, maybe it was time to build a new one that speaks. The door swung closed behind him, with a faint hiss, sealing off the murmurs, the filtered apologies, the non-committal smiles. The moment Shaq stepped back into the daylight, it was as if a weight lifted, not from his shoulders, but from the room behind him. That was the most telling part, how easily it all exhaled once he was gone. The streets buzzed with routine noise. Engines, heels on pavement, cab horns a few blocks off, but Shaq moved through it like a man with something heavier on his mind than traffic. His black Escalade idled right where Marcus had left it. The driver, alert, opened the door before Shaq reached it. Inside, the silence of the SUV was immediate and intentional. The doors clicked shut. The city stayed outside. Shaq didn't pause to process. He pulled his phone from the armrest console and dialed without hesitation. The voice on the other end answered after the first ring. "Jamal," Shaq said, his tone even but exact. "It's time." "Understood," Jamal replied without asking a single clarifying question. He had been waiting for this call since the moment Shaq first sent him a message that read, "Flagged. No explanation given." "Pull every account," Shaq said. "Foundation. Holdings. Investments. Freeze nothing. Move it all. I want it off their books within 30 minutes. Start with the community fund. Make it public." "Public?" Jamal echoed. "Yeah," Shaq confirmed. "Issue a formal statement. Say we're reevaluating our banking partnerships due to a breakdown in values alignment. Nothing angry, just language that gets passed up a corporate chain real fast. I'll have Elsa draft it, Jamal said. Estimated withdrawal just over 50 million across all arms. Once I execute the Treasury protocol, they'll see it. Good, Shaq said, leaning back as Marcus merged into traffic. Then we'll see if their back-end system runs faster than their bias. It took less than 5 minutes for Elsa to ping Jamal with a draft. By directive of the Executive Board of Shaquille O'Neal Enterprises. Effective immediately, we are terminating our banking relationship with Citadel Bank, citing unresolved integrity concerns and institutional incompatibility with our equity-driven mission. Future partnerships will prioritize alignment with our standards for transparency, respect, and procedural fairness. Jamal sent it to Shaq. Shaq replied with one word. Post. Elsa uploaded the statement on the Foundation's verified channels. Website first, then Twitter, then a 2-paragraph LinkedIn update that simply read, "When your money's good but your presence isn't, it's time to move." By the time Marcus turned left onto 48th Street, Citadel's Midtown branch was already buzzing with a new kind of energy. Not whispers this time. Notifications. Inside the operations hub, a low-ranking financial analyst named Dev Patel was the first to notice the alert. High-volume transaction flag. Corporate exit protocol triggered. Dev blinked twice and scrolled down. Entity. Shaquille O'Neal Enterprises. Fund arm. Shaq forward. Total withdrawal. $50,000. Method. Immediate digital wire with 0 internal hold flags. Routing. Diverted to 4 different credit unions and 2 fintech startups. Time elapsed 5 minutes 12 seconds. Final ledger balance. He sat back in his chair. Oh hell, he muttered. 2 desks away, his supervisor's monitor blinked with the same alert. Then her phone rang. Then her superior's inbox flooded with a duplicate copy. In seconds, a full chain reaction had begun, moving vertically through the Citadel hierarchy like a rising tide. The CFO's office buzzed next. "Sir," his assistant said, voice thin, "you're going to want to see this." Screens lit up like a boardroom. Christmas tree. Analysts scrambled. PR scrambled faster. "Is this a ransomware attack?" someone asked. "No," Dev said without looking up. "It's a reputation attack." In the Midtown branch, Gerald from compliance stared at the transaction dashboard in disbelief. The status showed complete, not pending, not queued, complete. His fingers trembled as he refreshed the screen again. Still 0. The second screen showed a bank-wide internal flag, with a header that chilled the air. Client departure level 5. High-value influence loss. Recommended action. Executive alert and immediate risk mitigation. "Get me the branch VP," Gerald said, already reaching for the phone. But upstairs the VP was already on another line, trying to explain to corporate why $50 million had left in one breath, and why no one saw it coming. He didn't yell, the VP kept saying. He didn't threaten. He just left. "People with real power usually don't yell," came the reply. Meanwhile, on social media, the statement had begun to trend. Not viral yet, but rising. Finance influencers reposted it. Sports journalists took note. Shaq fans chimed in with hashtags. "Money moves," "Shaq withdrawn," "Bank on respect." One thread even reposted a screen grab of Shaq seated in the bank lobby, face calm, folder in hand. Under the caption, "You can disrespect the man, but not his reach." At Citadel headquarters, the crisis team assembled in a 10th-floor glass conference room. Legal was there. PR was there. Even someone from their sports and entertainment banking unit sat in silence. "We can't lose someone like him," the crisis officer said bluntly. "He's not just a client," another added. "He's an ecosystem." And the damage wasn't done. Shaq's statement hadn't just pointed at Citadel. It had spotlighted their operating DNA. Quiet discrimination dressed in nice suits and layered protocol. Back in the car, Shaq watched it unfold in real time. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't angry. He was steady. "This isn't revenge," he told Jamal over speaker. "This is a receipt. They made a choice. Now they get the math." Jamal chuckled softly. "I hope they have a budget line for ego repairs." Shaq didn't laugh, not because it wasn't funny, but because this wasn't a punchline. It was a pivot. The kind that didn't just turn a story, it turned an industry lens. 50 million was money. But what left that building was more than capital. It was credibility. And that no internal system could rebuild on short notice. The call came at 4. Citadel's CEO Gregory Lang was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window in his Manhattan office, eyes skimming the horizon with the studied poise of a man used to surveying things from the top, markets, teams, cities. But today he wasn't reading the skyline. He was bracing for the fallout. His assistant didn't even knock. She opened the door half a step and whispered, "Line 3, internal priority, executive caller ID masked." Gregory picked up, pressed the line, and answered with a clipped lang. There was no greeting, just a voice firm, flat, unhurried, delivering a single sentence that reshaped the day. "You just kicked out the man who owns half the city block your flagship branch sits on." Gregory didn't blink, but his grip on the receiver tightened. "I assume you're referring to Mr. O'Neill," he said cautiously, eyes narrowing. "I was just briefed on the account movement." The voice cut him off. "Briefing won't help you now. You let protocol outpace perception, and now perception owns the narrative." "Who is this?" Gregory asked, though he had a sinking suspicion. The line clicked dead. No name. No goodbye. He stood there for a full minute, phone still in hand, letting the silence settle in like cold air in an empty vault. Then he turned sharply and called into the hallway. "Get Hannah. Get legal. Get media. Get everyone." Downstairs, in the operations war room, things were spiraling fast. The screen displayed a bright red dashboard alert, key client exit, high public influence. The column beside it flashed, engagement spike, 47K mentions in 2 hours. A younger strategist, sweating through her button-up, summarized the crisis in 3 words. "It's spreading everywhere." The head of communications, Sylvia Marks, was already fielding journalist inquiries. Bloomberg, Forbes, ESPN, NPR, even local outlets had caught wind, most of them sharing the same sharp headline: "Shaq walks out. $50 million follows." At 4:24 p.m., Gregory walked into the boardroom, his steps brisk but calculated. The room was filled with high-ranking executives: risk, legal, client relations, marketing. He didn't sit. He simply dropped his tablet on the table and said, "We've been outplayed." Silence. "By who?" someone asked, as if the name hadn't been trending all afternoon. Gregory didn't bother answering. Instead, he gestured to Sylvia. "Draft the statement." Sylvia was already ahead of him. She tapped her tablet, connecting the screen to the overhead display. The text filled the space like a confession. Citadel Bank acknowledges the departure of Mr. Shaquille O'Neal and his affiliated organizations as clients. We value diversity, accountability, and integrity. We are conducting a thorough internal review of the protocols involved and are committed to restoring trust with all community stakeholders. Gregory read it once, then again. "Cut the word departure," he said. "Too soft. Replace it with withdrawal. Make it clinical, precise." "Won't that sound defensive?" someone offered. Gregory shot him a look. "We're past tone. This is triage." "Should we reach out to Mr. O'Neill directly?" asked the VP of Enterprise Clients. Gregory's jaw clenched. He already made his move. Reaching out now will look like fear, not respect. He paused, then looked directly at Sylvia. "Add a line. Something about engaging with community leaders to ensure inclusivity protocols reflect modern equity standards." She nodded and typed quickly. Outside the glass, the PR team was already lining up tiered responses. One for investors, one for the public, one for internal distribution. But the damage was moving faster than the cleanup. In another wing of the building, the philanthropy office was in freefall. "We've lost not just his personal accounts," an analyst said to her manager, "but the entire Shaq Forward Foundation, the Education Trust, the Urban Redevelopment Bond Series, even the small business lending initiative we helped co-sponsor." "How many projects were they funding through us?" the manager asked. The analyst looked ill. 12. Across 3 states. The manager rubbed his temples. "That's not a withdrawal. That's a structural breach." At 4:48 p.m., a different kind of alert pinged through internal systems. A donor coalition that included Shaq had withdrawn its commitment to Citadel's upcoming community investment gala. The reason? Institutional misalignment with core values. The gala's estimated fundraising projection had just been slashed by 4. Back in Gregory's office, the phone rang again. This time it was an internal line. "Risk division." "Sir," the voice said, "there's something else." Gregory exhaled. "Go ahead." It appears that Mr. O'Neill's commercial development firm is the leaseholder for 3 properties we're currently operating in. including the Midtown flagship. Gregory closed his eyes. Meaning, we pay him rent. The irony hit like a silent bomb. They hadn't just offended a client. They'd humiliated a landlord. A man who had not only invested in the community, but had done so directly under their nose, through firms they hadn't bothered to connect to the name they'd flagged earlier that day. That's why he didn't yell, Gregory said aloud. He didn't need to. A junior staffer entered, holding a tablet. Sir, Twitter just passed 100K mentions. LinkedIn's got senior execs resharing his statement. It's being used as a business ethics case study. Gregory looked out the window again. This time not at the skyline, but at the Citadel logo etched into the glass of the branch across the street. It had always looked untouchable, imposing. Now it looked borrowed. He played it perfectly, he said under his breath. No press conference, no camera, just action. An executive leaned in. Should we re-offer him a deal? Priority package? Personal apology? Something high profile? Gregory didn't respond immediately. Then, no. Gasps. Stares. But, no, Gregory repeated. He's not waiting for us to catch up. He's already 2 moves ahead. He turned back to the group. Issue the release. But don't expect it to fix anything. This isn't about PR anymore. It's about perception. And we lost control of that. The moment we let someone read, sensitive watch flag, and think it meant anything other than fear. The room went silent again, not out of agreement, but because there was nothing left to argue. It was done. By 5:03 p.m., the release had gone out. By 5:15, Shaq's repost of the release was already going viral. Not with commentary, but with a single caption, "Systems speak loudest when they're trying to sound harmless." And with that, the narrative was no longer about him. It was about everyone else who had been flagged quietly, removed politely, ignored procedurally. Shaq had revealed something more powerful than wealth or celebrity. He'd exposed the comfort of bias in a suit and tie, and the cost of mistaking dignity for passivity. The press conference was held in the kind of venue that said everything before a single word was spoken. Not a hotel ballroom, not a boardroom, not even the lobby of a corporate skyscraper. It was hosted in a public library, downtown Atlanta, on the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows spilled light onto a podium framed by murals of community leaders, writers, and educators. No branding banners, no gilded sponsor logos, just a clean black backdrop, behind the podium and a single phrase projected above it in white sans serif text. Systems break people. People can fix systems. Reporters lined the front rows, their badges dangling from necks, phones raised, cameras set to record. Not because they expected scandal, but because what they were about to witness wasn't damage control. It was redirection. Shaquille O'Neal stepped onto the stage in a tailored navy blue jacket, white open-collar shirt, and no entourage, no agents, no bodyguards. Just him. Still smiling. Still centered. But today the smile was different. Not amused. Not cordial. It carried the weight of clarity. He adjusted the mic, looked at the crowd, then began. Let me make this easy. I didn't come here to destroy a bank. I came here to give them and everyone like them a mirror. The room fell quiet. Last week, he continued, I was removed from a financial institution's lounge for, quote, compliance reasons. My credentials were questioned. My payment flagged. I was asked to prove I had a right to be there, even though I had built half the development across the street from it. A few gasps moved through the room. Shaq smiled faintly. But this isn't about me. It's about what happens when systems mistake profile for legitimacy, when protocol becomes a mask for prejudice, and when power is so used to its own voice, it forgets how to listen. He paused. Let that land. That day, I didn't lose $1. I didn't lose a deal. I didn't even lose my time. What I lost, what we all lose when these moments go unchecked, is an opportunity to grow, to own the bias, to correct it before it calcifies. He clicked a remote. Behind him, the screen changed to a simple logo, EQS Equity Standard, Corporate Culture Repair, Executive Integrity Audits, Inclusive Systems Advisory. Today I'm launching EQS, the Equity Standard. It's not just a consultancy, it's a mirror. For banks, for corporations, for any institution claiming to stand on values it doesn't reflect in its daily operations. We're going in, not to shame, but to assess, to confront what's beneath the surface, to fix the gap between statement and behavior. The room shifted. Heads tilted. Pens scratched. He clicked again. Another screen. Certified Equity Index. Annual audits. Public scorecards. Real-time reform metrics. No more hidden patterns. No more invisible flags. If you operate in our communities, you're going to be accountable to them. One reporter stood. Mr. O'Neill, is this about retaliation? Shaq laughed once. Retaliation is when you react from ego. This is strategy from experience. Another asked, what happened to the staff who profiled you? Shaq nodded, as if he expected the question. Some were terminated. Some were referred to structured rehabilitation programs designed by bias reduction experts. But let me be clear. Firing people without fixing systems is like repainting a cracked wall. The damage is still underneath. That's why EQS will track not just who's removed, but how institutions rebuild trust after the fact. A third voice spoke up. And the employee who tried to help you? Now Shaq's tone softened. She didn't speak out loud. But she made a choice to acknowledge me. Not as a celebrity, but as a person who had been wronged. And sometimes that kind of quiet courage deserves more than just thanks. He clicked again. A photo appeared. The young black teller from the bank, standing next to Shaq at a small event the previous day. She held a folder with an EQS logo. Below it the caption, now EQS Youth Insight Board Member, Systems Reimagined Through Lived Perspective. She's our youngest board appointee, Shaq said, voice warm. Because the next generation doesn't need to wait their turn to be heard. The room erupted in applause. But he wasn't finished. I didn't stand up at that bank because I was angry, he said, voice steady again. I stood up because I was expected to sit down. And the difference between power and presence is what you choose when no one's asking. He leaned forward slightly, letting the mic pick up the next words with crisp resonance. I didn't lose anything that day. They lost the chance to be better. Now they've got to earn that back. Another pause. Then, calmly, he stepped aside. No dramatic walk-off, no pose. He moved to a nearby seat and let the room breathe. After the official remarks, reporters rushed the spokesperson. Interviews queued up. Editorial think pieces were already half-written in laptops. But Shaq, he sat quietly in the back, watching the same way he had watched in the bank, noting, listening, learning. In the following days, EQS trended on business platforms. Citadel's remaining senior leadership issued a second apology, this time requesting to partner with EQS for a full audit. Shaq didn't say yes. Not yet. His team reviewed their internal structure, culture, and training initiatives. Only once the data matched the apology did the discussion resume. Meanwhile, EQS onboarded 5 new clients in its first week. 2 banks, 1 retail giant, a city transportation board, and a Fortune 100 healthcare group. Each with a history of complaints buried under compliance paperwork. Each about to face themselves in the mirror. Shaq didn't take a single dollar in salary from EQS. His funding came from a philanthropic endowment under his real estate holdings. The message was clear. This wasn't business for him. It was balance. At the foundation office, the young teller, now board member, sat in on her first strategy session. Nervous, unsure. Until Shaq passed her a note across the table. It read, "You saw me, now I see you. Let's help others be seen." She folded it. Didn't speak. Just nodded. The kind of nod that meant something had shifted for good. And that was the point. If this story made you pause, even for a second, ask yourself, how many moments like this go unseen every day? This wasn't just about Shaq. It was about anyone who's ever been underestimated on site. Keep questioning the quiet rules. Keep choosing clarity over comfort. And when systems forget who they serve, remind them.